And after all, James Joyce certainly knew English, if anyone did. So there is something a lot more than just the words or phrases in any language. Does it connect with your heart? Does it connect with your soul? Does it come from your soul? Do you really feel that you are speaking with and listening to and listened to by people with whom you belong and who belong with you? And this is something that I think Dr. Martin Luther King says so much more eloquently than most of us could in this short excerpt I have here.
I come here tonight and plead with you. Believe in yourself and believe that you're somebody. I said to the group last night, nobody else can do this for us. No document can do this for us. No Lincolnian Emancipation Proclamation can do this for us. No Kennisonian or Johnsonian Civil Rights Bill can do this for us. If the Negro is to be free, he must move down into the inner resources of his own soul and sign with a pen and ink of self-assertive manhood his own Emancipation Proclamation. Don't let anybody take your manhood. Be proud of our heritage. As somebody said earlier tonight, we don't have anything to be ashamed of. Somebody told a lie one day. They couched it in language. They made everything black, ugly, and evil. Look in your dictionary and see the synonyms of the word black. It's always something degrading and low and sinister. Look at the word white. It's always something pure, high, and clean. But I want to get the language right tonight. I want to get the language so right that everybody here will cry out, yes, I'm black, I'm proud of it, I'm black and beautiful.
Okay, well, I don't think that needs any explanation. I was very lucky when I was a college dropout, actually, living and singing in Paris, rather down and out, actually, to meet James Baldwin, who was in exile, a self-imposed exile. He lived in the south of France. I don't remember how we met, but we met, and I am eternally grateful for that accident in my life. And in 1963, I think there was this roundtable of basically film and art type people. Baldwin was one of them. Even Charlton Heston, who used to be a liberal in those days, was in that gathering. There was Sidney Poitier and Marlon Brando also among them. But this was a group of all men. Katharine Hepburn, whom I also had the good luck to know from my days when I was a delegate to the World Youth Forum, and then she was very kind and invited me on several occasions to New York and to Connecticut. She told me that she would have gone, except that she was taking care of Spencer Tracy. You might recall, if you are really aficionado of films, that she was deeply in love with Spencer Tracy for most of his life and most of hers. And for 5 years, she retired from films to take care of Spencer Tracy when he was very sick in the 1960s. And I think his last film was with her, right? Guess Who Come to Dinner? For which she won an Oscar. I don't know if he did, but he died just 17 days after that film was made. And I think she always refused to see it. At least that's what she told me. But anyway, so at least one woman could be there who wasn't there. That's what I wanted to tell you. Okay, so let's listen to this very short excerpt from James Baldwin in that gathering.
Well, I know this. Anyone who's ever tried to live knows this. So what you say about somebody else, you know, anybody else, reveals you. What I think of you as being is dictated by my own necessities, my own psychology, my own fears and desires. I'm not describing you, I talk about you. I'm describing me. Now here in this country we've got something called a nigger. It doesn't have such terms as I beg you to remark exist in any other country in the world. We have invented the nigger. I didn't invent him. White people invented him. I've always known, I had to know by the time I was 17 years old. What you were describing was not me, and what you were afraid of was not me. It had to be something else. You had invented it. So it had to be something you were afraid of. You invested me with. Now that's so. No matter what you've done to me, I can say to you this, and I mean it. I know you can't do any more, and I've got nothing to lose. And I know, and I've always known. No. And really always. That's part of the agony. I've always known that I'm not a nigger. But if I am not the nigger, and if it's true that your invention reveals you, then who is the nigger? I am not the victim here. I know one thing from another. I know I'm going to be born and I'm going to be, you know, I was born, I'm going to suffer, and I'm going to die. So the only way you get through life is one of the worst things about it. I know that a person is more important than anything else. Anything else. I learned this because I had to learn it. But you still think, I gather, that the nigger is necessary. Well, it's unnecessary to me, so it must be necessary to you. I'll give you your problem back. You're the nigger, baby, it isn't me.
That's definitely something to think about. What's that? Oh, I see. Okay, and Sidney Poitier was also in the same gathering, and he says something very moving as well.
I became interested in the civil rights struggle out of a necessity to survive, and I think my interest started many years ago, never as intensely, however, as it exists today.
How about a personal participation, such as today's extraordinary participation? Is this a rare experience for you?
No, it is not a rare experience for me. I found, having lived in New York and in other parts of America over the last 20 years, since I came from the Caribbean, I found it necessary for self-protection and for to perpetuate my survival that I involve myself in any activity that would ease my burden momentarily.
The other person who was there also, Harry Belafonte, who has been very inspiring to me over the years. And he also, more than Sidney Poitier, had been involved in a number of very progressive struggles in this country. And he's old and ill now, but even today, I think he is very, very involved, and I think he will be till he dies. So if you reflect back on what Paul Robeson was singing, how he changed the last few lines of the song Old Man River, that lifelong struggle, lifelong fight is something that some of us at least feel that we should embrace, and it should be the code by which we live or try to live. Jesse Jackson, believe it or not, used to be a very eloquent person when he was young and an active participant in civil rights movement. So let me finish this segment with a short excerpt from Jesse Jackson.
Somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be on welfare, but I am somebody. I may be uneducated, but I am somebody. Many of you really believe that you're inferior. You really believe that black is supposed to stay back and white is right. Many of you have given up on being first-class citizens. You've given up on 3 meals a day. You've given up because somebody has defined you as a white man's slave rather than God's child. You're not put here to be a white man's footstool. You're put here to represent the very best in God's word.
Okay, that's young Jesse for you. But now I want you to hear part of a conversation between two women I really admire and I've learned a lot from since I was a student in high school. Angela Davis and Toni Morrison. They met in New York Public Library, I think last year, and had this conversation, which is very long. I'm only going to present to you about 15 minutes of that conversation, and it's pretty much self-defining and self-explanatory, so let me not delay this and go straight to the middle of the conversation.
Charlene was the first black woman to run for the office of the President of the United States of America. She was on the Communist Party ticket.
Yes, dear. I was actually, my first job was also a page in a library on 96th Street, and I'm also a writer, so you made me feel really good tonight about my prospects for accomplishment. My question is, I actually have two questions, and one is it's about your ideas around visual literacy. I immediately thought about movies, particularly in the context of how movies now are being adapted from books, and the type of literacy that we get from movies versus what we get from the book. It's always, I would hope the director is walking a fine line, although even with something like Eat, Pray, Love, the general masses were outraged. I think that becomes even more complicated when you talk about black movies, about black women in black movies, particularly like Alice Walker's The Color Purple, Waiting to Exhale, and now we have For Colored Girls coming up. And I just wanted to know your thoughts on adaptation and film, and also just if you could flesh out some more of your ideas in terms of visual literacy in the realm of film adapted from books. My second question is a lot easier. How did you two meet, and how did you end up writing her, editing her autobiography, or it's the opposite way around?
It's the opposite,
yeah. Right, exactly. Thanks.
I was at work. I don't know what she was doing. I had a job at Random House. And she was an acquisition that they were very proud of. And so we got to know each other at that point. I think I had published one book or two.
You had published Blue Sign?
Yes,
Already.
by the time.
And you were working
On Silver.
on, you had already published, you were working
That's
on
right.
Song of
Song of
Solomon.
Solomon. I had published.
Because I can remember you would like write 3 or 4 lines. We would be driving from your house to the city across the George Washington Bridge, there would be traffic, you'd pull out a little note tag and write, or you'd fix breakfast for a slave and Gino, and then you'd write a little bit here. And then when the book finally came out, I said, I cannot believe it. You know, it was like magical. It was wonderful. But also, I should say that I really appreciate what I learned about writing from Tony when I wrote my autobiography. You know, I was somebody who was used to writing philosophy. And so I didn't think about writing in the same way. And, you know, rather than like writing it for me, Tony would say, well, you know, what was that room like? You know, what did it look like? What was in there? What were the colors? And so she made me understand writing in such a different way, and I'm forever grateful for that. We also had fun. You remember when we went to the Virgin Islands? and I made you walk from one end of the island to the other.
There was nowhere in the United States where Angela could feel safe and right. So we went to the Virgin Islands for a long time. It was like a month or something.
Yeah, we stayed. Yeah.
Well, we were.
Because I remember we were going to stay at the Holiday Inn
And
Hotel, but it wasn't finished yet when we got there.
It was incomplete, so we went
Yeah.
someplace else.
Yeah. And we also went to, remember we went to Finland and
Yes.
Sweden
Yes.
and Denmark.
Helsinki.
Yeah. So,
Remember the photographers came out and these women, was that in Helsinki? These women formed a circle, huge circle. They held hands with Angela in the middle, and I was sort of there, but to keep the photographers and the journalists and
right.
the cops or whoever,
Yeah.
they just formed this
Yeah.
tight circle.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
I should have had a camera, you know what I mean?
But see, this was really wonderful.
What's that question?
Well, how we met each other. The question was
Yeah.
visual literacy.
Yes. Well, I think,
What? Movies and adaptations.
yes. And what do I think? I think that most of them are pretty off. There is some, I don't know if it's fear of doing something. You know how creative, say, African Americans have been with music? I mean, nobody told them how to do it. I was just reading about Bach coming out right after the Adam Bomb. It was so chaotic. I mean, everybody's building shelters and saying, oh my God, what is this? The music changed right away into something that were, you know, odd notes, screeches, new language. You know, they just took off. Anyway, back to the movie thing. It's as though they're fearful of powerful and different creativity. How to do something wildly different. Or they follow a certain pattern. You know, I mean, you know from first seeing everything. Now, I understand that the business requires certain kinds of formulas in order to get the money and get them out. I understand. It's such an expensive project. I would surprise anybody who does anything. I was stunned looking at, this doesn't have to do with African American films, but I saw, what's that, No Country for Old Men? My God, there was a movie with no score. None. I didn't have to, they didn't tell me dun 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 dun. The guy just blew his head off, you know, or something like that with no sound. There was just some Mexicans, you know, on the guitar. That's all you heard. It was thrilling. It's like they trusted me. You know, it was frightening. It was different, but I wasn't urged by the music, pushed. This is going to be scary. This is going to be happy. This is going to be, you know. And I thought, isn't that interesting? So that's a little bit I know about the movies. But what I'm saying is that I wish it were possible to do more inventive, creative, non-formulaic Hollywood things. It's possible in the movies. Hey, think about Passing Strange. Wasn't that something? I have never seen anything on Broadway that literate and that musically inventive and staged that way. That was really a leap for me. I thought it was fantastic. So it is possible, and I just want to say that, you know, I've been unhappy. Oh, not unhappy, but, you know, not wholly excited by and not satisfied by a lot of the films and musicals that are going on, although they're well-intentioned. For me, well-intentioned isn't good enough. It's like happiness. That ain't good enough. Don't rest on happiness. It's okay. I hope you all are happy, but we got to do more than that. More than that. Yes.
Hello. First of all, let me just say this is an incredible honor, and just to be in front of two of my literary and life heroes. I'm about to have my own breakdown without even reading Paradise. But I have two questions as well. The first being, you talked about, you know, writing a letter to Columbia and talking about in protest to what's going on with the miners there. What do you think in this time where it seems like lethargy and cynicism has risen so high it's almost, you know, choking us? How do you feel, what do you think the role of written protest is? I mean, does it still have an effect? The written letter of protest. The other question I have is also in these times, what do you think the role or the importance of the storyteller is?
Well, Angela, I want you to answer both of those questions. But I have to say, preface my observation. You know, we live in this fast food nation. Americans just want it now. And a lot. And they sort of like deserve it. You know, politically, everything. And with all the problems. And if you don't hand it to them right this minute, like at McDonald's, you know, you just drive by, tell the little machine what you want, pay the man the money, get your food and go on home. And it seems like that is, you know, this sort of constant thing. So that actually sitting down and writing a letter, mailing it, telling 3 other people to do the same thing, and organize, like actually get on the phone, call some people, you know, it's like, takes too long. Who's gonna come? I mean, no, it's like, it may take a while. It may take a while. That's my version.
Okay, well, I totally agree with you. Because we've forgotten how to write letters, you know. I mean, I was going to say, for those of you who will have problems actually sitting down and doing a letter and putting it in the mail, you know, finding out how much it costs to mail a letter to, yeah, right, and all of that. You could perhaps figure out how to email him. But let me see if I can answer that question in a slightly more complicated way, and it has to do with the previous discussion we were having about capitalism and the extent to which we assume that as individuals we are powerless, which is in part a consequence of neoliberal individualistic ideology, that we only think of ourselves as individuals. We don't think about possible connections, broader connections with communities that are not only in the U.S., but that are in other parts of the world as well. And it seems to me that this is the real challenge of this period. Even for people who consider themselves progressive in a country like the United States of America. because we also imagine ourselves as somewhat different from the rest of the people in the world. You know, American exceptionalism has its impact even on those who pretend to be most radical. Exactly. And so what would it take? What would it take to create a connection with that community I was speaking about? There are about 7,000 people, Afro-descended Colombians, many of whom still have African names because they have created a history and a culture that goes back to resistance against slavery, and they're still resisting. As a matter of fact, they received an eviction order for August 18th, and they refused to leave.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, and writing, to answer your question, is written protest is a process that can perhaps help us feel as if we are reaching out beyond ourselves, and that we have emotional connections with people who live on this mountain, in this village called Nakoma.
When I was young, they called us citizens. American citizens.
You were first class or second class?
That's right.
Second class.
Yeah. But the word was citizen because citizen suggests something that after World War all of a sudden, it's about my little tax, my little money. I don't want to give it to I don't want those people who should not have it. You know, and that you talk about capitalism sort of seeping into the blood. They just change the language and redefine us, and we go for it. Yes, my driver was fussing about his taxes. I said, so what? You pay taxes, so what? And but you know, so all of a sudden we lose who we are, or we're redefined. And when the language changes, we change. The labels change. So all of a sudden it's about taxes. If I hear something else about taxes, but if we were still citizens, that's a different thing. We feel some obligation. We don't pass by people.
And citizenship not narrowly defined.
No, largely. And there are no losers. I remember when hobos were romantic. Remember Hemingway stories? And they were on these trains, and they did stuff. Now they're the homeless losers, who, by the way, don't pay taxes.